Voices presents speakers on timely and enduring issues each semester to broaden and enrich the scope of studies at Hudson Valley Community College. Please fill out the survey. These help to inform our future programming. Today, Voices presents Dr. Jacqueline Richardson-Melecio. Dr. Jacqueline Richardson-Melecio is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert. She is a bilingual licensed master social worker and a doctoral level researcher, trainer, and diversity and strategic planning consultant. To her work, she brings over 25 years of executive level management, program development, delivery of human services, and large-scale workforce development initiatives experience. Jacqueline has committed her career to support organizations in building awareness, knowledge, and skill in understanding the impact of race, culture, and diversity. She assists in developing and strengthening the efficacy of service delivery and overall capacity for diversity, equity, and inclusion across all organizational components. Throughout her career, she has provided consultation and training services to corporate, community-based healthcare and educational organizations. She's an experienced consultant, trainer, and educator, skilled in addressing the challenges of social, political, and economic determinants of human conditions and translating this knowledge into solutions for complex systems of care and corporate structures. Please welcome Dr. Jacqueline Richardson-Melecio.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here with you. I will ask if someone can give me a 5-minute and a 10-minute and 5-minute warning on time. I would certainly appreciate it. I'm so pleased to be here. I want to give special thanks to Keisha Sawyers for all of her support and for the invitation to be here today. I just have appreciated all along from the very beginning all of the communications and answered all my questions and all of that. But most of all, I appreciate the invitation. I certainly want to recognize your president, Dr. Rasami, and the faculty of Hudson Valley Community College. I had, years ago, the opportunity to serve as an adjunct instructor, and I have long admired the commitment to students, the strong community engagement, and the innovation of Hudson Valley Community College. And I'm so pleased to be here today. It's a special week for me. I just sort of, I want to say, hit the button on my book. It's at layout. It will be out next month. And I'm so pleased, and I just love the idea that this is my first stop, my first place since publicizing this book. And this is such important work to me. I'm so glad to be able to sort of start this other end of that process here with all of you. I thank you so much. My presentation today will focus on the experience of belonging as essential to cultivating a workplace culture where individuals genuinely feel valued, respected, and recognized as part of the organization, and its importance in advancing the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within your organization or the organizations of which you are a part of. We can all instinctively understand the value of belonging in the framework of family and community. We can easily articulate the value of our interpersonal relationships with family members, with community, be it at home, in school, or in other social settings we might find ourselves in. Having lived, and I'm sure you will all agree, having lived through an all-encompassing pandemic where isolation became key to our survival, we can all understand our instinctive need for belonging and the importance of our relationships. Throughout the pandemic that threatened our very lives, there was a consistent pushback on the extreme preemptive measures taken, which resulted in isolation and termination of our everyday interactions and the sense of community. The interruption to our sense of normalcy left some of us dealing with the absence of our day-to-day interactions, our socializations, and all our role expectations that we go through on our normal day. While we found new ways to present in our relationships, we longed for a return to what we perceived to be the normalcy of everyday interactions. Our natural gravitations to be in contact with others was now met with urgent solutions and resolutions that remodeled and created and to recreate our normal patterns of belonging. We all tried to find ways to recreate our day-to-day connections, to maintain contact, to breathe life again into our relationships. Families celebrated key milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, family reunions, virtually via Zoom or other platforms. Some shared recipes, held cooking lessons, and other hobbies via the internet. And others found ways to use virtual platforms to earn income and to replace their lost income, or what was for some extreme isolation, for others the quiet and the time provided and the space provided space for innovation, if you will. For some, our workplaces being in limbo provided time and space for reflection never afforded by the day-to-day grind that is all too familiar to all of us. The challenges in trying to achieve work-life balance that we face each and every day. It was an opportunity to reassess the importance of familial community relationships and to reevaluate our priorities. For many, if not most, it became a reevaluation of how we as individuals are present for ourselves and for one another. Sustaining, recreating, growing our connections and our relationships was paramount. Our need to belong is universally instinctive. One can say that our need to belong was an underlying motivation and helped us to get through those hard times. I want to share with you my belonging story, and I know that we all have many. Excuse me. We all have many, and mine in particular is a childhood memory that I hold close to, and I think in many ways that it has many of the ingredients, if you will, of belonging, and one that for many is very familiar. These scenes here of folks on a kitchen table, sharing time, sharing a meal, sharing hobbies. These are all familiar scenes to us. In my scene, in my memory, it's the holiday season, and like many, it is a very joyous time for family and for friends. And as I think back, I can think of it and almost just visualize it in so much detail. The scene is filled with lots of flutter of family and friends and neighborhood members coming in and out. You would think there's a revolving door in the apartment my family and I shared in New York City. There's lots of noise and lots of chatter and 10 different conversations taking place all at once. The sound of laughter, the warm embrace and the welcome that each person receives as they come into the room, the sound of music playing in the background. While most headed straight to the living room to take a seat and chat with a family member not seen in what seemed like so long, others headed to the center of the living room, which served as our dance floor. I headed to where I felt the real action was taking place. I followed the grown-ups from the small kitchen and the table to the large dining room table. This is where the real action was, as far as I was concerned. The pretty lace tablecloth, which my mother embroidered the corners to make it fancy, was quickly pulled off the table. An old, less favored tablecloth was put atop, and an even uglier plastic tablecloth was put on top of that. Protecting the dining room table was paramount. You see, our dining room table was about to take center stage in an assembly line to beat all assembly lines as far as I'm concerned. You see, we were about to make pasteles. Some folks are familiar with it, and some folks may not be. If you don't know what pasteles are, it can best be described, and it just puts a smile on my face, as you can see, but it can best be described as a mixture of taro root and plantain that is filled with savory meat, usually pork. It's wrapped in banana leaves and then boiled. And perhaps these pictures here might look a little familiar. I think I was drawn to the action in the dining room not because of the food, but what pulled me in was the fun everyone seemed to be having, sharing old stories, catching up on the latest family news, maybe gossip, telling jokes, stories of family heroes and sheroes. They talked about the good old days, and they talked about today. The assembly line I mentioned was truly something to witness. Lots of ingredients, processing, and everyone had an opinion of just what was the right way to do it. But as in every year, we all ended up doing just what Grandma said, and because she said so. No other explanation was needed. The preparation of the masa, the preparation of the meat, getting the plants and leaves ready, the parchment paper, cutting the string, and when everything was ready, it was all laid out at the center of the table and everyone took their spot. And the production line was ready to go. I was young, but little by little I squeezed in and found a spot at the table. Someone would eventually just scoot over and let me in because I was so persistent. I was allowed to help even in the simplest ways at first. I was only allowed to cut the string, then pass the string, then cut the string. But eventually, I got older, and I was able to take part in each one of those critical stations to this very important assembly line. So this is a picture of one of my first batches after I got older and had my own family. And now, I pass on the tradition to my children. I do my best to recall the stories of those who are no longer with us. We tell jokes, we share our wishes for the holiday, our wishes for the future. The aroma fills the room, the laughter warms the heart, and the lessons, the wisdom is passed on. And yes, we eat. I share the story of belonging because it shows our innate reach to belong, to connect, that even as children, we naturally exercise belonging. It feeds our need to belong, our interactions, our relationships, they matter, and our experiences of belonging matter. Belonging is essential to our existence. It is our belonging experiences that fuel our ability to strive as humans, to grow and to develop. Maslow's hierarchy of need that many of us are familiar with identifies belonging as an essential human need, only preceded by our need for food and safety. In studies addressing mental health challenges, needs of older adults, the development of children, the need for human connection, relationships are deemed essential. Our connections to others and the world around us provide meaningful experiences that feed our human need for connection, that help us develop our self-identity, understanding of the world around us. Belonging experiences help us derive at our purpose and our value to the world and in the world. We define the quality of our membership and our participation, wherever we happen to be, in accordance with the human desire to belong, the quality of our belonging experience. In other words, our satisfaction with the quality of our interpersonal interactions influence our sense of belonging. The same is true for our workplaces. In the same ways that I've described, our experiences of belonging in the workplace matter. Jessica Pierce Jones, a researcher and author of Happiness at Work, indicates that we spend over 90,000 hours at work over a lifetime, 1/3 of our lifespan. While we may not often think about the time we spend at work in terms of hours over a lifetime, we can all agree that we spend a considerable amount of our day, our week, our month in the workplace, in the company of our colleagues. The organizations and places that define our workspace are more than just brick and mortar. They are the collective of individuals with diverse skills and experiences who come together to form the lived experiences of the workforce. The context, the quality and context of workplace interactions impact how your workplace is experienced, and it informs the perceptions of the workplace culture as being inclusive or exclusive. When we think about what we bring to the workplace, our workplaces are where we bring our skills we have taken the time to develop with both interest and intent. It is where we bring our knowledge, our gifts, our abilities to contribute, to create, and to grow. How belonging is defined, lived, and experienced in your organizations or in your workplaces very much matters. In the workplace, belonging is evoked through the experiences of inclusivity, equity, and a sense of value. Understanding how the policies, practice, and resources, allocations of your organization impact your workforce is key to creating a culture of equitable inclusivity and belonging. The workplace is not only a place where we bring our skills, time, and talents, but there is also an understanding that we will be compensated in some way, recognized. There is the expectation of participation and inclusion, access to resources, benefits, and services the organization has to offer. There is an expectation that the organization will invest in you, that you will have the opportunity to grow, that there will be mobility, your contributions will be recognized, that you will be treated with respect. All of these contribute to our sense of belonging in the workplace. Belonging at work is manifested in the experiences of compensation, recognition, respect, mobility, inclusion, a sense of safety, the ability to be your true, authentic self. All of those contribute to our feeling and experience of belonging in the workplace. How we belong is defined, lived, and experienced in your organization in many different ways. In the workplace, belonging is evoked through those experiences, again, of inclusivity, equity, and a sense of value. Understanding how the policies and the practices and the resources of your organization impact that experience for your workers matters. I had, in preparing for my book, the privilege of doing many, many interviews. And I wanted to just share with you just a few of the comments that were made. I wasn't able to include all of it in the book, but I just want to share some of those with you. So these are just a few quotes. There was no room for me there. My supervisor never told me about the training program. I was told I wasn't a good fit. What am I supposed to do with that? I was told it just wasn't my time, even after so many years with the company. They don't promote people who look like me. No one in my department was told about the promotion opportunity. And these are just a few of the experiences. In addition to the narratives of our workplaces and some of the conversations that I was privy to, if you will, I often in my interviews felt that I was sort of being brought into a private conversation between coworkers about their workplace experience, and it was such a privilege for me to have that experience throughout this process. But we know that in addition to the narratives of our workplaces, articulated through those experiences of workplace belonging and the many ways in which we speak to the efficacy of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that there is also a lot of research being done about workplace experience, in particular, looking at belonging. And these here are just a few examples. In 2020, Deloitte Human Capital Trends survey found 79% of survey respondents indicated that fostering a sense of belonging in the workforce was important to their organization's success in the next 12 to 18 months, and 93% agreed that a sense of belonging drives organizational performance. The Qualtrics 2021 Employee Experience Trends Study of more than 11,000 employees from 20 countries found that 66% of respondents indicated a sense of belonging and company social responsibility as critical drivers in employee engagement. Other influences to belonging noted in this report included open communication, feeling valued as a member of the team, and feeling supported through organizational changes. The study also found that 78% of people who feel like they belong at their organization also rate their well-being favorably. And lastly, a 2020 McKinsey study identified a lack of belonging or feeling valued at work as key drivers for why employees were leaving their employment. This study found that 52% of employees who resigned from their jobs do so because they don't feel valued by their manager, and 54% because they don't feel valued by their organization. I want to share with you a story of belonging. This one didn't get in the book, but I want to sort of apply some of what I've mentioned so far and use a true story. One of the things with the book that I wrote that was very important to me, I really wanted to let the voices of those that I interviewed who shared with me what their experiences were, I wanted the book to lend voice to that. And so that was important to me. And this is the story of Angela. Angela, excuse me, let me make sure I have the right slide. Yes, okay. So the story of Angela. Angela worked for an organization for many years. The agency had a good service reputation, in addition to being one of the largest employers in her area. They were known for their community partnerships and touted a commitment to diversity and inclusion as key to their mission. Given their size and reputation, Angela did not mind starting in an entry-level position. The diversity of tasks made it possible to learn new skills and gain understanding of the organization. She was also provided with the opportunity to participate in trainings, and she was even able to take advantage of the tuition reimbursement program, through which she completed her master's degree. She was eventually promoted to a program coordinator role, and while the increase in pay was not very significant, it was a step up for Angela, and she saw it as an opportunity to move up in the organization. After several years in that role, Angela was first in line to apply when the director role became available. After all, she had worked side by side with the director and supported many other directors in the organization. The first time the directorship was made available, she was discouraged from applying because the position had been informally promised to someone else. The second time, she was interviewed, but told she was not ready. When the third directorship came up in the agency, Angela was interviewed, but told that it just wasn't a good fit. As she looked around, reflecting on her workspace and shocked at not having received the promotion, she noticed that most of the individuals in the organization from diverse backgrounds were either at her level or below. She noticed that while the organization employed many individuals from diverse backgrounds, just as it said in their mission statement and on their website and in the pictures, the organization's leadership and mid-leadership had no representation of diversity. Angela decided it was best to take her skills, her experience, her degree to another organization. Angela has served in her new employer as Director of Client Services for over 5 years now and continues to grow in her role. And she expresses her commitment to being a mentor to others and to use her skills and experience to create opportunities for others. In our conversation, she emphasized the importance of mentorship, the importance of not just being at the table, but having a voice, being heard, being seen, as key to her belonging experience. And these were the things that were important to her. And she thought she would stay where she is for years. But while it was hard for her to move, because she loved that organization that she worked with, that she spent so much time, and she loved the work that they did out in the community. It was such a hard decision. And even years later, as I sat to talk to her, you can see that she was sorry that she had to leave. But she could also point to all of the positive experiences that she was having in her new place of employment. And in some ways, I would say that she didn't misuse even her negative experiences, because as she talked about the kind of leader that she wanted to be, the mentorship piece, creating opportunities for others, she took away the lessons from what was, to her, a very negative experience. One of the critical areas that contribute to an organization's capacity for equity are the policies and the practices that inform recruitment, retention, and promotion of the workforce. Human resources, talent acquisition, and evaluation and promotion processes are critical operational areas. They are the entry point to an organization. These areas control the mobility and the movement of the workforce within the organization. And so they're very critical areas to include in any diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. So often, organizations leave out the folks from the human resources, or sometimes for human service organizations that are providing services out in the community, they leave out their managers. They only send their direct service staff because they are client-facing. But it's important in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to include all of those pieces, because all of those areas, every area of the operations of an organization, an agency, an entity, matter. And there isn't a place in an organization where diversity, equity, and inclusion and the experience of belonging doesn't matter. So it's important to acknowledge that and to make sure that when we're gathering information, when we're seeking to make change, that we are looking at how does diversity show up in every single part of the organization. So you might ask yourself, given the expressed experience of folks in the workplace, at least a few that I shared, how do you get to the information that's needed? How can you be proactive in your response? Exactly what is the inquiry? I've put here just a few questions that I think not just organizational leaders, but individuals who find themselves overseeing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for an organization, that these are some questions that are important to consider because they allow you the opportunity to be reflective. What does it mean to be a member of your workforce? What if you were stuck in the elevator with someone and you had that, we call it that elevator speech? What might you say about the organization that you work for? How do you communicate individual value to the members of your workforce? How do those in your organization know that you value them, the skills, the experience, and the contributions that they bring? Are your supervisors trained to support staff growth? In what ways are you proactive about inviting diversity of approaches and thought to the work? How do you support innovation? How do you support workforce development? What does your onboarding process look like? Are there equitable communications, engagement, and participation across all the areas of your organization? How do you create opportunities to gather the very information that will inform more effective diversity, equity, and inclusion within your organization? The answers to these questions will help you to identify blind spots for your organization and for yourself as leaders. They will provide the information needs. They will inform what's the information and the feedback that you need from staff to help you to do the work and to help you to improve. When the members of your workforce have lived experiences at work that equate to meaningful inclusivity, equity, access, and opportunity to participate in the opportunities and resources of your organization, they are more likely to feel they are genuinely valued and included as part of your organization. This is belonging. As you think about how diversity, equity, and inclusion are operationalized across your organization, the experience of belonging is key. And a few more questions you might even consider. Who are you as an organization? Who's at the table? How is diversity represented? What does representation look like across the various staffing levels in your organization? What are staff perceptions of workplace culture? Does everyone feel engaged? Does everyone feel included? How do you demonstrate the value? How is equity and access practiced? How do you picture your organization in the future? Does your staff feel well informed about your organization? Our organizations have many layers to their existence and their operation, but none more valuable than those that make up the workforce. We understand the value of diversity, but it's more than representation. It is the capacity to invite a diversity of thought, diverse approaches to solutions, a diverse lens in examining the challenges that are presented. We understand inclusivity is important in examining the practices of an organization. It is not just the opportunity to show up, it is the invitation, the welcome, the engagement, and the level of participation. We know that in the absence of equity, the absence of true inclusivity, the presence of diversity falls short in creating a diverse and inclusive workspace, where the lived experience of belonging is the resulting outcome. I'm inviting you to examine the efficacy of your workplace, diversity, equity, and inclusion by utilizing the experience of workplace belonging as a true measure of your workplace culture. I'm Dr. Jacqueline Richardson-Melecio, and I'm the author of Belonging: Intentional Inclusivity.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Melecio?
Not sure the timelines. Is that, yeah, okay.
Yes, sir.
What do you cover in the book?
In the book, I cover all the areas, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I break them down. I talk about the workplace experience and the things that need to be measured and addressed. So I talk about microaggressions. I talk about bias in the workplace. I help the reader to examine all of the areas of operation in addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I use real-life workplace experiences through the interviews so that to help the reader apply that information. And I also include, which I think is very critical, and oftentimes we skip, I include at least an overview of our history of racism and bias, so that we can understand how does that manifest and show itself up today. So those are some examples of what's included in the book. Hope that answers. Is that okay? All right. Yes.
How many people did you interview and how did you find them?
Okay, so by word of mouth at first, one call led to another, and I did over 100 interviews. Over 100 interviews, yes. Oh, yes.
This question
venue
Okay.
perhaps a little bit.
Yes.
But how do you see what you're talking about for workplace play out specifically in the classroom?
Oh,
I know
sure.
for many of us, obviously, our workplace tends to be the classroom, and for students, that's where they would spend many hours
Yes.
of their days. So that's our sort of microcosm
Sure.
of our content, right?
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering how, because you're specific to
Yes.
the workplace,
Yes.
but how it might be in the classroom.
Yes, and even in the book, I use my classroom example and my own experiences. I try to use different life experiences as a parent, as a student in the classroom, in front of the classroom. And so I think it is very relevant. We are preparing our students to join the workforce, so having these conversations is very important in the classroom. I think that in the classroom, some of what is important, we certainly want to always capture a true history, but I think that we need to be mindful of when we are having conversations about what have been challenging periods of our history, that and knowing that some of the mindset is still in place today, is being able to be sensitive to the needs of students and the content that's being covered, and what efforts do we make as instructors to make sure that we are being diverse in our approach of the information, that we are being sensitive to the needs of students, and that we are allowing those voices to also be heard at the table. I think it's important also for instructors and for college campuses to be very aware of current events that are taking place that are impacting our students outside of the classroom, and being mindful of them, being able to dialogue and have conversations and bring current events to the table is very important. But there's a sensitivity that sometimes is missing. And I know that was some of my experience. I grew up in New York City and came up to Albany to go to college and sat in a sociology course, and they started talking about group dynamics, and they started talking about urban life. And as I'm sitting there, some of the words that they used, I would use to describe animals running in the zoo or some kind of commotion like that. And I was young, and I really didn't have my voice yet. And, I stayed there quiet, and it was very difficult because, one, I knew a different truth, right? And what was concerning for me at times is like, oh my goodness, I know it's not true. I know that's not all of it. But the person next to me didn't know. That person might just be taking what the person was saying for truth, and then what do you say when that's what the books had, that's what the statistics showed, and that's what was on the 6 o'clock news? So here's what was missing in all those places. They didn't understand the resiliency of my community in New York City, how we took care of each other. They didn't understand my mother's immigration experience, the skills that she brought from her country that helped her to get work, that helped her to raise a family. They didn't understand the challenges, the economic challenges of growing up in the city, and how that informed my access to education and other economic challenges. And so when we have these conversations about race, about economics, about social groups, we need to bring in the strengths of those communities, because it's a missing piece. We don't talk about it enough. It certainly isn't printed. And if your only reference point is the 6 o'clock news, well, you know what? The 6 o'clock news didn't talk about how my mother worked in a factory during the day and in a hotel folding sheets at night to make sure that I went to school, right? They didn't talk about, there's this, and I'll tell this story quickly. Do I have time? Yes? I'll tell this story quickly. I often give folks the picture of my neighborhood on a summer night, and we're all out there. And I call it drive-by research, where you stop and collect data and you know nothing because there's no relationship building. But if you drive by that street and you see us all outside on an evening, you're missing out on all that is going on. Very quickly you might pass judgment and say, Gosh, they're so lazy. Don't they have anything else to do? All these other words that we use when we don't understand what's going on there. But I want to kind of let you in and can I use this? Here, I'll do this. We'll be flexible. Is that okay? So in the neighborhood, it's a corridor of the building. There's a 6th floor walk up. And we're all outside. It's a hot summer night. There is no AC. We're coming outside, right? Yes, there is music playing. Yes, there's children laughing and running and playing tag and all of that. Some of us that are a little bit older, we would use the back of the trunks of the cars. Those were our benches. We had no pretty trees and benches. It's the city. So those were our benches, and those who were older and felt we were too mature to play tag and such things that were for babies, we'd sit there and we'd tell stories. You would see, yes, someone braiding somebody's hair. You would see women gathered on one side. And on the other side of the building, and I can picture it now, there were these 4 men. They had come from the factory, and I know because I could hear them walking outside. My window was on the 1st floor, and they would be leaving for work, so I know I could hear their steps, and I could hear cars slamming because they couldn't get a job in the city, so they had to ride in a group, all of them, to Connecticut to the factory. That was the closest place. But those gentlemen who sat on the side, and the 4 chairs, raggedy chairs, I don't know how it held them up, but they held this board on their lap, and it was a makeshift table. And they would sit there and play dominoes. And you'd hear them laughing and telling stories. But if you're driving by, what you don't know is that one of those gentlemen is a professional tailor. The other gentleman was an engineer in his country, but because of the language barrier, can't get a license here. So he's cleaning floors during the day and mopping. If you watch those gentlemen carefully, because everybody's watching the kids and we all take care of each other in community, they're glancing over and making sure that their kids who are playing are okay and still where they were the last time they took a peek, in the midst of shoveling the dominoes. And I can hear the sound of the dominoes going. And you can just see it in their eyes, that all the wishes that they had for themselves, they now had for their children. And if you just drive by, and if you just come in, you'll miss it. The women who are gathered on the other side, and yes, somebody's being tormented and getting their hair braided, and they can't wait to be done so they can go join all the other kids playing. But there's something else happening on that side too, because there's a new family who immigrated to the community. And we have found out that they don't have clothing for the children. They don't have a job. And I always say, I didn't just get my social work degree upstate. I kind of got my training down there. Because I assure you that by the end of the day, there was furniture collected, there was a bag of clothing, and there was food. And it didn't matter how poor we were and how little we had. When you sat down to eat dinner, you made sure you didn't sit to eat your dinner before you made sure the neighbor was okay. And if someone came over at dinner time, it was not a disturbance. It was an opportunity to share the blessing and to share what you had. And that's what we miss. And that's what we need to bring the strength of that into the classroom when we're teaching our children. We need to celebrate the diversity of where our students come from, because there is greatness in every person that sits in your classroom. And bringing that out, that's our job as instructors. That's the job, to celebrate not just where they're going, but where they are and where they're from. And sometimes you might be the first person. Wouldn't it be great to be the first person that acknowledges that for them if no one else ever told them, if life never told them, if they're sitting in your classroom feeling intimidated? Tell them. Tell them. Thank you.